Ephesians, the 4th chapter, beginning in verse 1. Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. He says, "Therefore I, the prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance or forbearance to one another in love." Circle that, in love. "Being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace." Now skip down to verse 11. "And he gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. As a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming, but speaking the truth in love." Circle that, second time. "We are to grow up in all aspects into Him, who is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself." And what shows up for the third time? In love. 3 times in this reading. God has a plan. God has a purpose for His people. And that purpose is for each follower of Jesus, each Christian, each believer, to be an active participant, a functioning participant in this very special spiritual community of fellowship known as the church. And why is that? Well, for one reason, living as a follower of Jesus is not going to be easy. There's going to be times in which all of us will get discouraged. There will be times we will become disheartened. There will be times when we will be disappointed. And so what God has done in His infinite wisdom is surround us with others who can provide one another care. And so we work to help one another and serve one another and encourage one another. And sometimes we cry with one another and we rejoice with one another. And what is the purpose of all of this? One another. Look at the last phrase in verse 16 that we read. For the growth of the body, for the building up of itself in love. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of need that. And I'm guessing you do too. Now, here's what's interesting about as you read through the New Testament. The emphasis in the New Testament is not on self, it's on others. The emphasis in the New Testament is not on me, it's on you. The emphasis in the New Testament is not self-serving, it is in fact me serving you. And you serving me, and we serving each other. Because we serve the one who said in Mark chapter 10, I did not come to be served, I came to serve and I came to give. And he says to all of us, go and do the same. Now what we're going to learn this weekend is that these one another admonitions of Scripture fly in the face of this, how can I phrase this, Christian at large philosophy that I come across sometimes. And I'll hear people say sometimes, I want to be a Christian, I want to be a follower of Jesus, I just don't want to be tied to any church. And I call those people Lone Ranger Christians. And I know several who have that mindset and who have developed that mindset. I have a really, really good friend who that's his thinking. He wants to just be a Christian all by himself. He used to be a gospel preacher. And so we had a conversation one day. We were talking, and because I tried to stay in touch with him, and we were talking one day, and I said, okay, tell me, I get what you're saying. Tell me what you do on the first day. Every week the first day rolls around. What do you do on the first day? He said, well, I get up and eat my cereal and I'll say a prayer. I said, okay. He said, I'll go out and take a walk. He said, I'll go walk a couple miles out in nature, and I might even pray some more. I said, okay. He said, I might walk and I might sing a hymn as I walk. I said, okay. He said, so I worship. I said, okay. But I said, here's my question. Pretty simple question. How does that help me? How does your doing that motivate me? How does your doing that encourage me and build me up? And he laughed and he said, you know I can't answer that question. I said, I know. I know exactly why you can't answer that question. Because it doesn't help me and it doesn't help anybody else. So what I want to communicate with you this weekend in this very short time we have is that there are a lot of reasons why a local fellowship of believers is important. But at the very core are all of these one another admonitions. Over 50 times in the New Testament, these writers try to capture the specialness, if that's a word, of this mutual relationship we should have with each other. And so you read, build up one another, honor one another, be of the same mind with one another, accept one another, admonish one another. How about this one? Greet one another, serve one another, bear one another's burdens, bear with one another, encourage one another, over 50 times. Now you tell me where that happens. And I'll answer the question. It happens in the local fellowship of God's people. That's where that happens. So we're talking about a principle that I think if we applied it, it would turn any church dynamic into a force for good. And it would take us away from playing church to being church. But please be advised, this is not easy. And Paul, in the text we just read moments ago, said, this isn't easy. Did you catch that in verse 3? Being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Another word for diligence is effort. Another word is work. This takes work. And where does it all begin? All of these one another's. Where does it all begin? One place. Love one another. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. Because love one another is the umbrella. Love one another is the umbrella under which all of the other one another's appear. Only when we love one another will we be able to honor one another. Only when we genuinely love one another will we be able to accept one another and bear with one another and bear one another's burdens. There's no way you can do all of that. There's no way you can overemphasize what we're going to talk about tonight. Because we're talking about the greatest commandment. Remember in Matthew 22 when that lawyer came to Jesus and he said, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, and soul. And he said, a second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said love is paramount. In 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians 14, Paul talks about the very special place of miraculous gifts in the infancy of the church. But he says at the end of chapter 12, in the very last verse, in the very last phrase, he said, there is one thing that is more critical, that is more important, more powerful than any miracle. Well, what could that be? You see that at the end of chapter 12 and verse 31. I'm going to show you a more excellent way. What is that? Well, skip the chapter division. He says, if I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but if I do not have love, I've become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. He says, I don't care if I could speak in all of these foreign languages I have never studied, and I can speak fluently. He said, I don't care if I could speak in the language in which angels speak, whatever that is. He says, if I don't have love, I'm just making noise, he says. He says in verse 2, if I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and knowledge, and I have all faith so as to move mountains, but if I do not have love, I am nothing. He said, I can have miraculous insight. I can have miraculous knowledge. I could have heaven-inspired faith. But if I have not love, he says, nothing. And then he takes it a step further in verse 3. If I give all of my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but I do not have love, it profits me nothing. He says, I can engage in all of these acts of charity. I could become extremely benevolent. I could be philanthropic. I could have conviction that would lead me to martyrdom. But he said, if I don't have love, it's nothing. Maybe this is why, out of all of the one another's, this one is repeated more than all the others. This command is repeated, if I counted right, some 16 times in the New Testament. Love one another. That's why when Paul wrote letters to these churches, this was his emphasis again and again and again. For example, when he writes to the church at Ephesus in chapter 1 and verse 15, he says, for this reason, having heard of the faith, your faith in the Lord Jesus, which exists among you, and your love for all the saints. When he writes to the brethren in Colossae, in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 12 and verse 13 and verse 14, he says, so as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Beyond all these things, beyond them all, he says, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. And when he writes the Thessalonians in chapter 3 and 11 and 12, he says, I want you to abound. I want you to abound in your love for one another. And in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 9 and 10, he says, as to the love of the brethren, you have no need for anyone to write to you. For you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. For indeed you do practice it toward all the brethren in Macedonia. But here's his point. But we urge you, brethren, excel still more. And that's our message. That's our message. Like to the Thessalonians, I'm not saying that we don't know how to love one another. We do. But the message that we need to hear is we have to excel still more. Why? Because all of the other exhortations grow out of this one. All of the other one another exhortations answer the how. This answers the what. And if we don't get the what right, the hows are not going to follow. In the 13th chapter of John, in John 13, 34 and 35, Jesus said, I'm going to give you a new commandment, that you love one another even as I have loved you, that you love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. He says it 3 times. 3 times. Here are the Christians' marching orders. Here is our signage. Here is our advertisement to the world. Here is the mark of genuine Christianity. What is it? It's love, he says. Now, there's a delicate balance in all of this. Obviously, Jesus is not teaching us to just love only Christians. That's not what he's saying. We understand from other scriptures, we are to love the lost. We are to love our neighbor as ourselves. Galatians 6 and verse 10, as you have opportunity, go out and do good unto all men. Why? Because all men bear the image of God. All men are God-made. All men have an eternal soul. Jesus died for all, John 3:16. But the point is, if I am to love all men, stair step, how much more should I love those with whom I share a common bond in Christ? And so that's why he says in Galatians 6:10, while we have opportunity, do good unto all, but especially to those of the household of faith. How can I love the lost of this world if I don't love the saved of the world as well? But go back to what Jesus said in John 13 and verse 34, because he gives us a standard of quality. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Well, wait a minute. I can read that in the Old Testament. I can find statements in the Old Testament that we're to love each other. But the command to love one another is qualified by the example of Jesus, and that makes it new. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. We are to love each other based upon the standard, and it's a high standard set by Jesus. We love each other as he loved us. And it's not easy. And it's more than the mushy husband and wife passing each other in the morning. I love you. Oh, I love you too. No, that's not what this is. I love the story of the elderly couple. She was getting very hard of hearing. And he looked at her one day and he said, Gertrude, I love you. And she said, huh? He said, Gertrude, I love you. She said, huh? He said, Gertrude, I love you. She said, oh, I'm tired of you too. Yeah, it's more than that too, you know. That's why John writes in 1 John 3 and verse 18, he says, don't just love in word or tongue. Love in deed and love in truth. Love with your lips, but love with your life. But then look even closer in verse 35 when he says, by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I want you to think about what Jesus is saying. Jesus gives the world the right to judge us based upon what? A sign out here in front of a church building? That's how they'll figure it out. Or maybe they'll come into an assembly and they'll see we observe the Lord's Supper every first day of the week. Oh, that's how they're going to figure that out. Or they hear us sing without an instrument. Oh, that's how they're going to figure it out. That's not what Jesus said. I'm not dismissing any of those things. I'm saying, here's what Jesus said. The people in the world are going to judge us based upon what they see in us. And they may not know all about any of these other things, but there's one thing they're going to be able to figure out really quick. And that's whether we love each other. Because if we don't love each other, how will we love them? I think sometimes people forget when guests come among us, they're watching, they're looking, they're observing, and yes, they're judging. And Jesus says, I tell you, I'm going to give them that right. I'm going to give them the right to look at you and judge you based upon what they see in you as to whether or not you love one another. And then he goes a step further than that. But you've got to go over to chapter 17 to find it. Chapter 17 and verse 20 and 21, Jesus says, I do not ask on behalf of these alone, but on those who believe in me through their word. that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. If we don't have unity, if we don't have love for one another, our message, the gospel message, is going to fall on deaf ears. There's an old saying, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you, what? Care. And sometimes there's too many churches and too many preachers who have all the right answers, they think, but their attitude stinks. And we've got to get back to understanding how important is it to have the right attitude. And a lot of that comes down to humility and loving each other and understanding it's not about me. It's about all of us. So let me leave you tonight with 5 things. 5 things. 5 facts about love and how to put it into practice in a local assembly. I like practical stuff. I want to know how things, it's one thing to give a lesson that's informational. I want to know how is it relational. I want to know how does this apply to me? What can I take from this in real time, in real life? What can I do with this and use it in a very practical way? So I'm going to give you 5 facts. You got something to write with, something to write on. I encourage you to write these down because invariably somebody's going to come out and go, what was number 3? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Real quick. Number 1. Love is having to say, I'm sorry. Now, 3 of you are old enough to remember a movie that came out in the 70s with Ryan O'Neal, and I forget it. There was a love story. There was that famous line in that movie. Love is never having to say you're sorry. That's the dumbest thing ever. Because the truth is, love is having to say you're sorry. In fact, Jesus puts so much emphasis on it. In Matthew 5 and verse 23 and verse 24, he says, this is more important than worship. He says, 5, 23 and 4 of Matthew, in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, he says, if therefore you are presenting your offering at the altar, and you remember your brother has something against you, leave your offering. And go first be reconciled to your brother, and then come and bring your offering. He says it's that important to do everything you can to reconcile anything you can possibly do. Paul said on one occasion in the book of Romans, if possible, as far as it depends upon you, be at peace with all men. What's the implication? Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes there's only so much you can do, but you make sure you do what you can do. And the rest then isn't on you. It's not up to you. If there's something you need to make right, then go make it right. Take the initiative. What happens in a marriage when there's unresolved conflict? What happens? Somebody says, oh, it goes away. It just disappears. No, it doesn't. It doesn't disappear. Love is having to say, I'm sorry, and make it right. Julie was going on some kind of conference, and I was home for a few days and had a weekend. And I tend to throw too much out. I tend to clean out, just throwing stuff away, And so while she was gone, I decided to clean out the garage. And I had a yard sale. And if you came to my yard sale, you'd get stuff really, really cheap, okay? Because my philosophy is if you don't pay me something for it, then I've got to haul it to the dump. And so I'd rather get a nickel, and I'm happy, it's something I don't have to haul. And so I'm selling all this stuff out of the garage. It's great. And so by the time she got back home, the garage is cleaned out. She pulls the car in. It's all organized. It's all clean. And I'm standing there, and I'm just like, praise me, I did so good, And she's looking around, she goes, wow, this is great. I love this, thank you. And then her eyes looked over in the corner and she said, where's the little red wagon? I said, the little red wagon? She said, yeah, the radio flyer, little red wagon that we pulled the kids around in when they were little. And that we pulled the grandkids around when they were little. Where's my radio flyer, little red wagon? And I knew at that moment, I was dead. I said, I sold it. And she was so calm. She said, you sold it? I said, I sold it. She said, how much did you get for it? I said, $5. I told you cheap. I got $5. She said, you sold the little red wagon for $5. And I said, yeah, I did. She said, huh. And she turned around and walked in the house. She never said another word about it. Months went by. She never said another word about it. And it was about the middle of November, and one day she hands me a piece of paper. And I said, what's this? She said, it's my Christmas list. I said, Christmas list? You never give me a Christmas list. Well, I decided to make one this year. And I opened it up. It had one item on there. Can you guess what it was? A radio flyer, a little red wagon. Well, I was coming up this way. I was coming up to Pennsylvania for a couple weeks. There's a small church up there that I love. I love these people, and I go up there a couple times a year anyway. And up in Amish country, it's in Lancaster County, and I go up there, and I got on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm looking around, and I'm finding all these little red wagons. I couldn't find any little red wagon for $5. The cheapest I found was $50. And I finally went and bought one and paid more than that for it and hauled it all the way back home. And on Christmas morning, it sat under the tree with a big bow. And she said, you did good. I said, well, I just got to ask you, why is that so important to you? She says, it's just that every time I pull into the garage, I see that every time I come in there and all those memories, it just makes me feel good. I said, okay. So today, that little red wagon sits over there in the corner, and she feels good, and I'm out about $60. Okay. Love is having to say you're sorry. When you mess up, own it. Own it. Secondly, love is showing you're sorry. When you hurt somebody else, it's not solved by just sort of blowing it off as if it's no big deal. If you've ever raised kids and tweens and up into the teens, and siblings can kind of get at each other. They just kind of go at it, And so finally you've had enough. And you get them together, and your parent patience is just about over, and you get them together, and you look at this one, and you look at this one, and you say to this one, say you're sorry. How's that usually work? Well, they kind of bow up, cross their arms. They just kind of stare you down, and they stare each other down. And then you turn to the other one and say you're sorry. Same thing. But because they're in such an uncomfortable situation and they want to get out of it, this is what you're going to get. Sorry. And the other one says, sorry. Okay, hug and make up. That goes over real well, too. That's not what this is. That's not what this. When we say it, we need to say it and mean it and show it. What is it John the Baptist said in Matthew 3? Bring forth fruit in keeping with your repentance. Love is saying I'm sorry. Love is showing I'm sorry. Third, love is going to cost you. It's going to cost you. In Matthew 5:41, Jesus talks about going the extra mile. That means nothing to us. In that culture where Jesus lived, was an occupied territory. And a Roman soldier had a right, by Roman law, the Roman soldier could compel a citizen of that land, in this case a Jew, he could compel a Jewish person to carry his luggage for 1 mile. He could command anybody to carry his luggage for 1 mile. And so here is a Roman soldier, and he sees this Jewish young man, and he says, hey, come here and get my bags. And the kid, man, he just hates this, and he picks up the bags with disdain, And he walks and he walks and he walks, says nothing, gets to the mile marker, drops the bag in a cloud of dust, turns around and walks off. The soldier grins because he kind of enjoys this. And he walks along and he sees another Jewish young man. He said, "Hey, come here and get my bags." This young man stops what he's doing, runs over there, picks up those bags and says, "I'm glad to help." And he starts carrying the bags and he says, "Where are you from? Where are you going? How long have you been serving in the army?" And he starts carrying on this conversation with this soldier, and the soldier is taken aback. And so they talk and they talk and they talk, and they get to the end of the first mile marker, and the kid ignores it. Goes on. And the soldier's like, well, I guess he didn't see it. And they get to the second mile marker, and the kid puts down the bags and says, "There's the mile marker." He said, I really do need to get back to my work." And the soldier laughed and said, "Yeah, the first mile marker was a mile back down the road. You carried my bags 2 miles. You didn't know it." He said, "Oh, I knew it. I knew it. I saw it." He said, "Why did you carry my bags 2 miles?" He says, "Well, because I'm glad to help. I'm glad to meet you. I'm glad to learn about your family and just have a chance to visit and talk and make a friend." And he says, "Besides, my master says, if somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go 2. And the soldier says, "Who in the world is your master?" And the boy says, "His name is Jesus. And he will change your life." It's going to cost you. We could talk about the statement Jesus made that we call the Golden Rule. We could talk about the Good Samaritan. If a church is going to succeed, we have to be willing to pay the price that love demands. And love is going to cost me. It's going to cost my selfishness. Number 4. Love would rather solve a problem than win an argument. Love would rather solve a problem than win an argument. Most people like to win. But sometimes in church settings, we can focus more on proving my point than unity. And so I can win an argument, I can win a battle, I can prove my point, but sometimes I can do it with such an attitude of arrogance that I lose my brother. It's not worth it. I don't have to have my way because it's not about me. Love would rather solve a problem than just win an argument. And I'm not talking about standing for truth and all that. I'm talking about just personal opinions and scruples and stuff that we all have. And sometimes you just put that aside and love your brother more than all of those things. And the last point, number 5, is love is not easy. He's not asking us to do something easy. This is hard. I think about the 12. And I think about how they tried the patience of Jesus again and again and again. Thomas, we know what we've tagged him with. James and John, sons of thunder, really? Peter, open mouth, insert foot. I mean, how many times does he do this? And yet there's a statement in John chapter 13, in the beginning of that scene where Jesus is ultimately going to wash their feet. It says, Jesus loved them until the very end. They were anything but perfect. Like all of us, they had their faults. And he dealt with them, and he had to put up with a lot. And he was so patient with them. But I need to be reminded that he has to be just as patient with me and with all of us. Because this love is not easy. So let's go back to where we began in Ephesians 4. In those first 3 verses, read them again. Ephesians 4, 1 through 3. Therefore I, the prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love, being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Somebody can go away tonight and say, well, what did he talk about? Oh, he talked about love, love, love. Do you know how hard this is? This is hard. And this is going to cost you. And sometimes love may mean you have to get down into the messy with somebody and help pull them out of the pit. This is not easy stuff. But if we want to be a church, a fellowship in which the Lord is pleased, this is what we do. Now, tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock, is that right? 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We're going to start talking about some of these individuals, one another's. At 2 o'clock, we're going to talk about members of one another. And how Paul talks about how the body, the physical body works. He says the spiritual body's the same way. And then we're going to talk about, at 3:30, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. That's family. So he goes from the body to family. We're going to talk about that aspect of it. And then Sunday morning at 9:15, we're going to talk about honor one another. And what does that mean? And then bear one another's burdens, followed by the final lesson, bear with one another. I hope if you can be here, I hope you can come. To our visitors, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for encouraging us tonight on this opening lesson. So much to talk about, so little time to do it. But I'm not going to keep you very long at each time. When I lived here and preached in Roanoke years ago, I think I talk a lot longer than I do now because I was in my 20s. And when I was in my 20s, I knew more than I know now. Because it's funny, the older you get, the more you realize the less you really know. So it doesn't take me too long to share what I know. I hope you come back. What's the song?
Number 394, Love One Another.
394, Love One Another. We didn't coordinate this. That's perfect. That is perfect. If you owe a duty to God in some way tonight, you need to make your life right with Him. If you're not a Christian, you can be baptized. I'm sure can make arrangements be made for that. If you need to make things right, you can do that tonight. You need our prayers for just whatever you're facing. You can do that. Love one another. That's what it's all about. Let's stand. Angry words, oh, let them never